Welcome back. We're going to pick up our discussion about aircraft instrument systems, going into the area of the gyroscopic instruments. A little explanation about the gyroscope, and I should actually have my gyroscope here with me, but it is in the classroom, the avionics lab. Regardless of the position of its base, a gyroscope tends to remain rigid in space with its axis of rotation pointed in a constant direction. A gyroscope's rigidity in space makes it useful for determining the attitude of an aircraft and the direction the aircraft is pointing. So the axis is in effect the points at which the gyroscope is actually attached to the holder. And it will tend to stay upright, like a top. You can see the various figures. So even if you're off to the east, it's balanced. I guess I'm not exactly sure what they're trying to explain there. I've seen it before. Gyroscopic precession can be observed with any rotating mass. In this figure, a rotating bicycle wheel is placed on a gimbal. When a force is applied to the wheel while it is rotating, the effect of the force will cause the wheel to pivot or precess around the gimbal in a horizontal direction. Probably the better illustration would be the smaller one. You're applying force at the top, but the resulting motion is actually off to the side at a point 90 degrees. So apparently it's an exact 90 degrees. Interesting. What is the name of the effect that causes a gyro to respond to an applied force at a point 90 degrees further in the direction of rotation? What was that word? That was precession. Gyroscopic precession. What other words could I use? To pivot or precess. Okay. So precession is a form of pivoting, but it actually pivots 90 degrees further in the direction of rotation. One instrument that is used as a heading indicator, it's similar to a compass. It's basically letting you know in degrees what direction you're heading. And you can see from the illustration that it also has a lubber line similar to a compass. If there was a drum type card that you view through a window with a lubber line marking where your actual heading would be. The modern heading indicator uses a vertical compass card that's connected to the gyro gimbal by a series of gears. So here's the gears over here on the right. There's the main drive gear attached to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 other gears. Flooded with robocalls. That may happen again. It's the work hours or the office hours. An attitude indicator, another gyroscopic instrument. The gyro in the attitude indicator spins in the horizontal plane. 2 mountings or gimbals allow the gyro to tilt freely in the pitch and roll planes. Due to rigidity in space, the gyro remains in a fixed position relative to the horizon as the case and the airplane rotate around it. Okay. And they have a representation of the horizon with the sky above it, the ground below it, and the yellow figure appears to be your aircraft with its wings. And the modern attitude indicator, that they do not need the caging mechanisms, and they have the ability to be quickly erected. They are clearly marked with pitch and bank reference marks and a horizon card that resembles an actual horizon. So, a pitch is up and down as you're climbing or descending, and roll is in effect where you're rolling sideways. And you can see where if you are rolling, you're going to see the representation of the plane roll in reference to the horizon. An attitude director, it's whenever you're being you're being directed to do something, so it will suggest to you or to the pilot where you should maneuver to. In this case, you're fine, I guess. In B, the little marks on the side are suggesting that you climb to that level, which the aircraft on the right has done. Another director is the flight director. It's similar. 2 narrow wedges on this flight director match the pitch and roll information to the pilot. RMI stands for a radiomagnetic indicator. It combines a slaved gyro heading indication, which is the red triangle at the top of the gauge, with a magnetic bearing information to a VOR station. That's the solid pointer. That's pointing at 18 right now. And an ADF station, if it's not the same place. The hollow arrow pointing to, in this case, it's 30, what would that be? 31.5. As you can see, there's several gyroscopic instruments. This one here's the turn coordinator. This is one of the older versions, one of the original flight instruments, because they would have this little rolling ball in a mechanism similar to a level, but as you can see, there's a little roll to it, and it helps you basically make smoother turns. A turn in this case if you want to keep it within 2 minutes, because you're in no big hurry to turn in most cases. They're usually slight turns. And you turn so you're not really shoving the ball off too far in the information. Basically, there's the three axes of flight. This one covers two of them, about the longitudinal and the vertical. Yeah, so because it's also showing you the direction you're going. But there is no pitch information. So there's no up or down or lateral axis information. So two of the three. No pitch. Okay. The question is, a turn coordinator instrument indicates A, the longitudinal attitude of the aircraft during climb and descent. B, the need for corrections in pitch and bank. Ooh, it said no pitch information. And pitch is climb and descent, so it's got to be C. Both roll and yaw. That's what a turn coordinator does, C. How many of the following are controlled by gyroscopes? An attitude indicator, a heading indicator, and the turn needle on the turn and slip indicator. We didn't really look at what a turn and slip indicator is. That's more of this the last instrument we looked at. What was it? The nomenclature? The turn coordinator. Sometimes they'll call that slip and what they call that? The turn and slip. So actually that is also being controlled by the gyroscope. So I guess all three. Directional gyro, going back to that, that's in effect the compass, which was connected by gears so that you can actually get a display. It'd be like holding a compass on the side. It's not really going to work. But a turn coordinator with a series of gears, you can turn it on its side so you can mount it in the instrument panel. And they don't call it a compass because of the way it's mounted, so it's actually a directional gyro. And it's not geared to the magnetic field of the Earth. It is actually gyroscopically driven. It's often the primary instrument for direction because the magnetic compass fluctuates so much. A gyro aligned with the magnetic compass gives a much more stable heading indication. Gyroscopic direction indicators are located at the center base of the instrument panel, basic T. So that's the leg of the T. The nose of the small fixed airplane on the instrument glass, and you can see the little airplane, indicates the aircraft's heading. And you can't really tell the nose on this one. It is actually, the nose is always pointing north. This one's not as clear. It almost looks like it's pointing east. A lubber line, this is the third time we've seen the word. It's the reference line on a magnetic compass, directional gyro, or cathode ray tube to indicate the nose of the aircraft. The heading is shown on the card or the dial that's opposite the lubber line, the card behind the line, the stationary line, and the card moves. I should probably put this slide somewhere earlier. Now, here's why it is, because there's another question about the lubber line. The lubber line on a directional gyro is used to A, represent the nose of the aircraft. Sounds good. B, align the instrument glass in the case. That's a slippage line. Or C, represent the wings of the aircraft. Okay, so it is the nose of the aircraft. What direction the nose is going. You don't really care what direction the wings are going, presuming they're coming along with the nose. How do you power the gyro? If I had one here on the table, I would be pulling a string like a top, getting it up to speed and setting it on a little tripod and showing basically how it continues without falling off. But eventually it will lose power and fall off. So how do you keep that spinning? Well, the most common method is air, but let's see what they say. Basically, you keep blowing air on it. If you could get a little power air source on your gyroscope, theoretically you can keep it going. It would have to be in a box so that you're not knocking it off its axes. Gyroscopic instruments are essential. They provide critical attitude and directional information, especially under IFR. Sources of power vary. I would imagine electricity is another source. Originally, gyroscopic instruments were strictly vacuum driven, so instead of blowing air across it, they're in effect drawing air from behind it. A vacuum source pulls the air across the gyro inside the instruments to make the gyro spin. Later, electricity was added as a source of power. The turning armature of an electric motor doubles as a gyro motor. Oh, that's clever. And in some aircraft, pressure, like I was talking, rather than vacuum, is used to induce the gyro to spin. I would imagine electricity is probably an easier one to maintain. What are the three sources of power used to drive a gyroscopic turn indicator? Well, right there, if you were taking your oral exam, it would be fresh in your mind, but just come back and review this stuff. Vacuum, electricity, and pressure. All right, maybe I should have added a few extra words. Air from a vacuum or a pressure source or an electric motor. A venturi is I would call it maybe a basic functioning item in nature. Basically, the air pressure changes as it goes across the venturi, and early gyroscopic instruments were powered by these venturis. They were located on the outside of the aircraft. I don't think you're going to run into too many of these. Normally you're going to have some sort of pump, in this case a vacuum pump. There's two different types, wet vacuum and dry vacuum. Wet vacuum usually is using some sort of oil as a lubrication and for sealing in the pump. Pressurized air from the outside from the outside of the pump with oil removed is often used to inflate de-icing boots. And I don't know if right now is the most appropriate time to go through some of the details on these diagrams. Air is coming in at two locations here. The pump is pumping it in, and the oil on this side is being separated out, so it could be sent to the de-icer boots or returning, and the oil from the oil separator is returned to the engine crankcase. So basically the vacuum is sucking the air in from, at least from this source here, which is a further one away. And that air is running across the gyros here. The dry vacuum, you see the pump over here, and it is actually pumping in air right at the pump. And it is, oops, I said that wrong. It's basically doing the same thing. And yeah, that's the pumping out. So basically the air's coming in on the opposite end through a filter. The vacuum pump is drawing it in like a vacuum would, and it is spun across, in this case, two gyros to keep them up to speed. The gauge in the cockpit is attached right there, and apparently there's a regulator. This is a dry. This one is dry, so there's no oil being used, but because of friction, there's going to be wear on the vanes, so they cannot tolerate any dirt or other particles, because that will quickly damage the graphite vanes. Suction relief or vacuum regulator valve. Since the system capacity is more than is needed for operation of the instruments, the adjustable vacuum regulator is set for the vacuum desired for the instruments. Yeah, usually you pull in a stronger vacuum than you actually need, and then you regulate it down to precisely what you do need, rather than having it at maximum the whole time, which isn't going to be as precise, because there's going to be drops if you're always at maximum. But if you're dialed in at 60%, even if the source fluctuates, you can still keep that proper PSI going across your instruments. Any excess suction is reduced when a spring-loaded valve opens to the atmospheric pressure. So basically it's relieving the vacuum. Kind of a hole on the side of your vacuum cleaner that you can open and close and increase the vacuum pressure or decrease it. A gate check valve. That prevents possible damage to the instruments by engine backfire that would reverse the flow of air and oil from the pump. So, we use check valves in a variety of spots on the airframe. So here we also have a check valve. So we want the suction to go this direction, but if all of a sudden for some reason the suction's backing up, coming from the opposite direction, this little door will close, and that's how a check valve opens. So you don't have to worry about all of a sudden the excess, in this case negative pressure, comes in. Air filters, as you're drawing the air in, it is filtered, and as you can see, it looks like there's a corrugated type removable filter perhaps in this diagram. All particles can damage the rotors and gyros. An air filter ensures that only clean air reaches the instruments. The master air filter screens foreign matter from the air flowing through all the gyro instruments. Yeah, you definitely want to keep, if you're just drawing air in from the outside across delicate instruments, yeah, you're definitely going to want to run it through a filter. All of a sudden, flies and dirt and sand, it's not good for your instruments. And therefore, it's extremely important that the filter receive regular maintenance. Don't let it get clogged up. It reduces airflow, which will give you erroneous readings. Sometimes each instrument is also provided with individual filters, usually like a foam type rubber filter. In systems with no master filter that rely only upon individual filters, clogging of a filter does not necessarily show on the suction gauge, and it doesn't necessarily affect your other instruments either. Vacuum system filters must be changed regularly to protect the dry type vacuum pumps and gyro instruments, particularly with dry type. Anything extra on this one? It doesn't appear. It shows an inline filter in addition to the inlet filter. So there may be more than one filter that needs to be maintained. Which statement regarding an aircraft instrument vacuum system is true? A. Dry type vacuum pumps with carbon vanes are very susceptible to damage from solid airborne particles and must take in only filtered air. So far that sounds good. B. Vacuum systems are generally more effective at high altitudes than positive pressure systems. It shouldn't really make a difference. C. If the air inlet to each vacuum instrument is connected to a common atmospheric pressure manifold, the system generally will be equipped with individual instrument filters only. Well, if you have a common manifold, more than likely you have a filter attached to that common manifold. So the only one that would really be true is A. Which procedure should you use if you find a vacuum-operated instrument glass loose? Okay, so it's supposed to be under vacuum or, the absence of pressure. And all of a sudden you have a loose glass, so it is getting air from the outside. So what do? Do you apply some glue that glass? Do you try to figure a way of tightening it or replace the glass? No, I'm just talking. I would jump right to C, install another instrument, but what else do they say? Replace the glass? No, the technician may not do that. A, mark the casing glass with a slippage mark, not for a vacuum instrument. That might work for a magnetic compass, but it's not going to work for a directional gyro. You replace it and send it out. The instrument glass should not be loose. Send it back to probably to the instrument repair shop to reseal it. which they'll be happy to do. That's their bread and butter right there. Which condition would most likely to cause excessive vacuum in a vacuum system? How come you get too much vacuum? Perhaps that regulator is not working? Let's see. Vacuum pump overspeed. B. Vacuum relief valve improperly adjusted. Ooh, I like that one. Because C. Vacuum relief valve, the spring is weak. I like improperly adjusted because it's pretty broad. I mean, it even covers a weak spring. Well, maybe not. But the most likely cause is it's improperly adjusted. So let's see. Because the pump running over speed isn't going to necessarily change the amount of vacuum. All right. Okay. Good covering another one with you. Stay tuned for the next. Later.